school, or playing truant as they call it, was actually quite common. A lot of times you didn't fancy going to school. But in this village, we had a gentleman called Mr. Foster, who was the school board man. He was a small guy. He always wandered around in a Burberry raincoat with a clipboard under his arm, a little moustache, little black moustache, a bit like Hitler, and glasses, and was bald. And he used to hide around the corners of the streets, especially down the bottom of these ones. So if you decide to take the day off and you were going to go down to the front street of Swalwell, Mr. Foster would be lurking to get you, and generally he used to grab you by the ear and pull you up to your parents to tell them that you'd been playing truant. Never really resulted in much, but Foster would of course report the fact you'd been playing truant, and you would get a little warning from the school. He was here for years. I think he disappeared sometime around about the mid-60s, and he was certainly here for at least 10 years that I knew of. And he was feared, actually, almost as bad as the headmaster of Swalwell School, Percy Crozier. Percy was a disciplinarian. He was really tough, and everybody was terrified of him. But he ran the school with a rod of iron. And if Percy got his eye on you, you knew you were in trouble. And he was a great wielder of the cane in those days, of course, which could be used, not unlike today. And I think almost anyone at one time in their life at Swalwell School had been the victim of Percy Crozier's cane. Never did us any harm.
You had to go down all these stairs. We used to carry them on our head to a big washing basket, you know. My mother used to do that till she was really a good age. And you put 6 lines out in the back lane. And I mean, a lot of what taken up were nappies, you know. You washed them. Oh, I used to hate that job because you had to do them, and they were boiled and washed and boiled, and then put through some clean water. Then you had to put them in cold water with the blue, you know, the blue bags. And that, oh, and your hands used to be freezing. And then you had all the other washing on top of that, naturally. I don't know how my mother survived. When I think about it, you know. And I thought, I'll never live to be my mother's age, never. And yet she died at 86 and I'm 89, and I still can't fathom that out. You know, strange, isn't it? But if you have to keep going. Sometimes you're not as fit some days.
Wash days was, you stick the things on a Sunday night, the whites got steeped in a dolly blue, and then early morning the washing was done, put on the lines, dried. Tuesday was ironing day. Wednesday was airing day. There used to be aired in the house, and then put away. You know, it started all over again. It used to take nearly the whole week for the washing, but I can always remember my nana's washing being brilliant white. I can remember running through the washing as a kid in the streets when they had them across the lanes, you know. Of the coal man came up the street, that everybody had to get their washing in and then put back out again.
I used to go to the pit to order, 10 shilling a half a ton. That was a lot of money in them days, you know. And my mother used to get a half a ton. And they weren't big, not like you used to get off the coal man when I had a coal fire. You used to get big chimney coals, you know. And used to tip them, it used to seem such a lot. And with it being a narrow yard, and you used to carry 2 pails, and you used to get your knuckles scraped, and you used to get run for laughing. Jean and I were always laughing. No, it was a happy day. It was a happy day, so you had nothing. At Christmas, you had your father's sock, clean sock. In the bottom, there would be a few nuts, an apple, an orange, and a penny. And McGregor's shop, they used to be beautiful with hankies of all Cinderella scenes and pantomime scenes, you know. And you got a hanky. And you thought you were the greatest because you got one of those hankies. He treasured it.
But everybody was friendly. You know, you could leave your doors open. I had an aunt, she was to go out and leave her door, and my dad went over one day, and when she came in, he says, "Do you know that door was left open?" She says, "Well, I've got nothing to pinch." She says, "But nobody comes in," and it didn't.
I started by having a paper round. Mr. Kimber gave a paper round. And, you know, it stemmed from there. I used to spend a lot of time delivering papers. And the type of person I used to like help people in the neighbourhood, whether it was old or young. And so I got on sort of like, whether it was just running errands for him or just helping in the shop, serving behind the counter even though I probably shouldn't have been when I was 11. But, you know, I grew up, I started like just helping and that. And then every Sunday morning, he used to have to deliver along to Axel Park. And he had a cycle, and he put his papers into the bag, and put the bag over his shoulders, and he used to be on the bike, and I used to be running behind him. Didn't used to cycle very fast, but I always remember I used to cycle behind him. And I used to go along on the Sunday morning with him. We used to deliver the papers, and he used to collect the money for the papers every Sunday morning, and then we used to ride back, go back to the shop, put everything away, and on the Sunday morning when we're finished, I used to go back to Arthur's house, him and his wife. She used to be baking every Sunday morning. She used to have a cup of tea in the fresh china and a freshly baked scone. And that was my memory of Mr. and Mrs. Kimber. And, you know, he was a lovely man.
Actually, you know, sort of everybody was very, very pleased about it. We thought, great, we won't have to go into Newcastle for everything. It meant that we watched it growing, and the children watched it growing. And when they had a few nights where you could go in, the shops weren't open, but you could wander around and have a look. And of course it opened in bits. Everybody was very eager to find out what the next bit was going to look like, you know, and did bring people in, but then we sort of hit the traffic problem. Nobody could get out of the estate because the cars were all lined up, because it was very popular when it first opened.
Well, Swalwell was self-contained. You need never go out of Swalwell to shop, and now there's not a decent shop in Swalwell. You could. They had this co-op at the bottom which had everything in it. We had a dentist even, we had a doctor, we had shops, we had small shops inside, and of course you could say there's plenty of pubs, and the industry, well, but the industry was nearly finished apart from pits and you know, Ellis's and Delta and places like that.
Well, of course, Swalwell hoppings are famous, and they've been famous for a couple of 100 years. They even have their own song. They were held just along here on the right-hand side, on what is now Rosebud Close, in what was known as the hopping field. Old photographs of the hoppings, you can see the hill here, and the Seven Sisters Hill in the background. And they would be held every year, certainly up until the early 60s. They would come and they would be on the hopping field here, and they would have the shuggy boats, and they'd have the roundabouts and the coconut shies, everything like that. And they go back hundreds of years, and they were very, very famous. In fact, I did hear a rumour that the town moor was actually set up as a competitor to Swalwell hoppings, which was one of the biggest forms of entertainment during that time.
And then even I used to buy black pudding to put into oven pie, you know, steak in oven pie. And he would say, it was the only thing he wouldn't eat. He said, if you'd seen that made, you wouldn't eat it. He says, you wouldn't eat it if you saw it made. But we still used to eat it. And he would be eating it likely because it used to go to mush in the gravy with the other meat, you know. But every pub in Swalwell went by the people that run it. The maids used to be the maids. But the next one was Joe Bruce's, which was the Highlander. And he always gave it Joe Bruce's. And the next one was where Burgoyne's is now, and that one was called Dinah's because a woman called Dinah had that, Dinah Simpson. And the one on the bank, which was the Station Hotel years ago, was called Bunny's because somebody called Bunny had it.